Hi everyone, it's me. I think you all know who I am. I'm going to be giving you some exam feedback, this is possibly one of the most important ones that you need to engage with, actually, because it's all about how to answer the questions and pitfalls and techniques and things like that. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking to you about how the question should be answered and various things, and then I'm going to be reading out some of your answers as well, where you produced some really good answers. If I don't read your answer out, it is not because you didn't do brilliantly, it is simply because there are more of you than there are questions. So for example, Faith scored, I think, full marks up until the 8 markers, but I haven't got time to read hers out. Doesn't mean she didn't do brilliantly. So I've just picked some that were easy to do. So what you're going to need for this is you're going to need either your exam paper, if you've managed to print it out. That's best to make notes on. If you haven't got the opportunity to do that, just some paper and a pen. You really need to make comprehensive notes on this because they will massively help you when you get to year 11. So this is the time to pause the video and get a paper and pen. Luke? Okay, good. And we're back. So basically, I'm going to go through the questions and talk you through the paper. Okay. And can I just say I'm really proud of how the majority of you really engaged with this paper. The fact that you're putting so much effort. Oh, there I was doing really well, not rambling, and here I go. Oh well, it wouldn't be a Miss Car video otherwise, would it? The fact that you guys are putting so much into your theory work right now means that we can go back to practical when we return to school, which I hope will be sooner rather than later now with all the new government guidelines. So thank you for all your beautiful concept performers and all your efforts on this paper, and paying attention to this now means you can store it and have it for year 11, which basically means that if we're ahead of the game on the theory side, then we'll have time to easily focus on the practical. So here's question 1. Okay, so the character is Mrs. Lyons. The line, they say that if either twin learns that he was once a pair, they shall both immediately die. Describe 2 ways you could deliver this line effectively in performance. So clearly this is an actor question. We've talked about actor, director, designer. Sometimes these overlap, but in this case it's very much an actor question. So I think one of the tricks of the trade really is to try to use the wording in the question where you can, because it emphasizes, it's in your face to the examiner that you've understood what the question is asking. So I would use the word effective. So that's my one tip here is Mrs. Lyons would deliver the line like this, and this is effective because. So it's a mark for an accurate identification of how to deliver the line, and then a mark for, and in each case up to 2 marks because it's a 4-mark question, for the description of how this is effective in the performance. If you've got an opportunity there to really gain marks by using the words in the question, and that's a skill that's worth learning, because that will take you all the way through to university. It's basically informing the examiner that you are right in your answer. You're more likely to get a mark if you say this is effective because, and give a not very good reason, than if you don't use the word effective. So always use the words in the question, and therefore circle the key words in the questions. It's worth taking the time to do that. So the exam board says a good answer is Mrs. Lyons moves around Mrs. Johnston in a wheedling, sneaky way, playing superstition to support her case for keeping their deal secret. This is effective because it helps to build tension. So as you can see, even though it is a question about delivering a line, it is okay to talk about physicality for this particular question, because that is part of delivering a line, how the character moves and gestures and looks and makes eye contact. Personally, if that question came up, I would play it safe and speak about the voice, because you just never really know with OCR. I'll give you a good example later of what I'm talking about. I would play it safe and go voice, but you would get marks for delivering the line physically as well, because that is part of the acting of a line. So I'm going to read you Jacob's answers. So Jacob says, an actor could deliver the line effectively by stammering and pausing midway through in order to build tension and show their character's emotion and vulnerability. This would be effective because it builds a relationship with the audience and therefore creates an emotional investment in the characters. Jacob now already has the marks, and then he just keeps going in true Jacob style, but a lot of you guys did this. And this is what we call a waffle. You've probably learned it from me. I would be exactly the same, but the extra lines that Jacob has then put is not going to give him any extra marks. It's a 4-mark question, so he's given me an 8-mark answer. He's given me a worthy 8 points, but he's not going to get them. If he then at the end of the paper doesn't have time to answer the last 8-mark question, then he's lost out. And I think that applies to a lot of you. You do not have time to write in masses and masses of depth on the questions, and you can bullet point. You will not lose marks if you bullet point. So this is like a classic rookie first mock exam mistake that everyone makes. It's just time wasting. So an excellent answer there. And for his second point, again an excellent answer. Another way an actor could deliver this line effectively is by using a more ominous tone than usual. This would be an effective technique to use because it builds suspense and creates an underlying sense of fear in the audience. Excellent answer. And he's got his 4 marks, and he's written another twice as much again, which isn't necessary. So great answers there. He's even managed to get the word effective into each one twice, which is literally telling the examiner that he knows what he's talking about. Okay, a bit of paper rustling. We are going to move on to question 2. Right, a nice question, this one, I think. Showing a mood in a moment through lighting and or sound. Another 4-mark question. And again, therefore, another one that you didn't have to write a philosophical essay about. So please take note of the and or there. Describe 2 ways lighting and or sound could be used to show tension at one moment. It's so important to read the question. First of all, and or means that you could have written about lighting for both your examples, sound for both of your examples, or lighting for one, sound for one. It doesn't matter. I think you felt like you had to write about either lighting or sound, which is fine. And one lighting and one sound, which is fine, but just know that if it's and or, then it can actually be but 2 lightings or 2 sounds if you feel like you're stronger in one of those areas. I mean, this is quite a straightforward question because it's a 4-marker, but if it was an 8-marker, then you might want to really think about where your areas of strength lie, and they probably are more in lighting than in sound. So here you would get the marks for describing the lighting or sound effect, and then for how it could be used to show tension. So again, it's all about answering the question and using the wording from the question, which in this case is tension. So it's da 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 da, the lighting or sound effect. This would show tension by because. And again, don't write too much. A lot of you wrote too much for this question too. So an example that OCR have given is A loud drum heartbeat could sound when the twins meet. This builds tension and conflict between the twins and enhances their different backgrounds. They've also said for their other example, the lights could dim to a red when they become blood brothers. This builds tension and highlights what is to come. Pretty straightforward there. What is also key for this question is that it says building tension at one moment in the performance text you've studied. You've got to really pay attention to things like that. One moment, sometimes it will say 2 moments, one actor. It's really, really important, especially when we get to the later questions where I'll talk more about this, about reading the question properly. It's better to spend time reading the question, circling the keywords, and understanding what the question is asking, and it's not wasted time, is what I'm saying, I suppose, to do that. So I'm going to read you a little bit of Katie's PhD thesis, because quite frankly, this is one of the longest 4-mark answers I've ever read. Obviously, this is a full mark answer again, but Katie, like Jacob, has just written more than she needed to. So she's stated the moment, which is good and important. She's put end scene with Mickey holding the gun up to Eddie. And she has said a gobo could be used at the end, projecting pictures of the twins' lives and times together from when they were born in the hospital to the moment that Mickey held the gun to Eddie's head. This would add tension for the audience by showing their life and making it feel very emotional. Tension will show the fate of the 2 boys, knowing this was going to happen and thinking about how this could have all changed. This also shows tension by showing everything that they've been through and done together and everything that has happened in their life, ending in the final fate of both of their deaths, knowing that this is the end for them. Those pictures are going to be the last memories of the twins. I think this is a really lovely idea, actually. I mean, not that it matters, because if you can justify it, it doesn't matter how bad an idea is. But I really like that, this kind of montage of the twins' lives kind of passing by at the end. That would be very emotional. Good idea, Katie. I like it. She's then gone on in the second part to talk about using a strobe light flashing when Mickey's talking and speeding up to build tension. This I'm not so sure about. It's a full mark answer because she justifies how it would build tension very well. Although personally, I think maybe it would be a bit distracting, possibly, to have a strobe light flickering during that end scene. However, full marks to Katie. And I do like the montage idea. And we move on to question 3, which I think actually as a class you all did really, really well on all the questions up to the 8 markers, which really shows us where we need to do the work. And it's mostly about how to break down the 8-mark questions. So really, I think we're on a winner, because at this point last year, my year 11s were not answering the 4 and 6 markers as well as you guys are. So I think that's really good, because even in lockdown, sitting with the books at home and everything, because the ambiguity of some of the questions, you have more time that you could use, but you can't really cheat. Not really. You've got to still be able to answer the question. You guys have shown me really that you can do that with the 4 and the 6 markers. So this one is one of my favorite. So select and name a different character from the performance text from question 1, and then it's like a box question. And so far these box questions have appeared every year. And then it's literally, you get a mark if you describe the use of physicality, and then you get a mark if you justify it. So for me, there's not really, this is an easy question, really straightforward. And it's obviously an actor question, So the main things I need to say really is read the question. First of all, answer about a different character to question 1. All of you did this, so well done. There was someone who didn't do it last year, so although it would have been 6 marks, they got 0. So read the question. The other read the question issue is about the fact that it says use of physicality. So that does not include voice, costume, makeup, hair, staging, or proxemics. It just doesn't. And some of you actually wrote about voice. And whilst they were great examples, they won't get you any marks. So read the question. Physicality is about gesture, posture, facial expression, body language, and all those things. And actually, you don't have to write a thesis in that box either. All you need to say is slouched posture. In fact, one of the OCR's examples is movement. It says in the left-hand box, and then in the right-hand box it says, in the second act, there's a bounce, lightness of movement, energy, hope, and quickness to Mrs. Johnston, like a woman reborn. Well, that's a great justification, but all it said in the use of physicality box was movement. Because it's a keyword, it gets the mark. Personally, I think that's risky. I think it's much better to describe the physicality. So I would have said, this is a bit vague from OCR, I would have said bouncy movement in that box and then justified it in the next box. But that is all you need, 1 or 2 words in that. And some of you have written loads of whole paragraphs in the use of physicality, and there's no need for it. So for this kind of question, you might get a question like this about voice, about personality traits. Like I said, it's appeared every year. Fingers crossed it appears again. It's important not to be vague. It's important to actually really then, in the justification, actually describe it. So I'm going to give you an example by Luke. Big up Luke, who got full marks on all the 6-mark questions. That is what I'm talking about. And Luke never writes too much, but he still got full marks. So Luke wrote about Mickey, and he said, use of physicality, a look of confusion on face, example, justified example. Mickey's talking to Eddie. He hasn't got much of an education, so he doesn't understand everything Eddie says. Boom, 2 marks. Then use of physicality, nervous, agitated body movements. Justified example. When Mickey's a teenager, and pretty much the whole way through his life, he's loved Linda, so he gets nervous around her. Boom, 4 marks. Slumped posture is the use of physicality, and the justified example. When Mickey's older, he's very depressed, and the slumped posture could symbolize his mental health over the years getting worse. And boom, Luke has scored 6 marks without writing a thesis. And also, he might have time to finish the exam. So time management is something we're going to have to work on, I think, as a class, for sure. Right, moving on to question 4. Advantages and or disadvantages of stage types for Blood Brothers, and in this case it was a promenade theatre. Again, this is an and or question, which means that you could write about 3 advantages or 3 disadvantages or 1 advantage and 2 disadvantages and so on. What you did not have to do, which some of you did, is write about an advantage and a disadvantage for each point, which means you gave 6 advantages and disadvantages. The question is not asking you to do that. It gave you 3 lines. It only is asking you for 3 advantages and or disadvantages of staging Blood Brothers in the style of promenade. So some of you again wasted a bit of time here by writing more than was necessary. It's 3 lines. It's a 6-mark question. So it wants 3 advantages or disadvantages with 3 justifications. It's a director question, but obviously also relates to design and acting. So it's one of those that overlaps. I'm on the wrong page in my mark scheme here. Hold on a minute. Right, here's something that I think is a little bit unfair from OCR. So where people haven't done this, I've still given you guys the mark. So they've said that if you don't state whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage, you wouldn't get the marks. So even if it's really obvious from your answer that it's an advantage or a disadvantage, you could only get 3 marks out of 6, which is quite unfair because it doesn't say that you have to state it specifically in the question, but in the mark scheme it does say that. So it's a little bit unfair. However, again, this is why you just have to be really clear cut and really in your face. An advantage is, a disadvantage is with the examiner. Really, in this case, the easiest thing is probably to circle whether it's an advantage or not. So you get a mark for identifying the correct advantage or disadvantage, and then a mark for explaining that advantage or disadvantage. And I have to say, even though the kind of stating it didn't really happen, this was the one question where the whole class got full marks. So well done, guys. You've got this. I'm going to read you some of Isaac's advantages and disadvantages. Isaac says that it's an advantage that the audience can feel involved in the performance and therefore can connect with the characters more. He says that it's a disadvantage that there may be blocking as everyone is on the same level, causing obstructed viewing. And then he says that it is a disadvantage as it's harder to experiment with staging, e.g. flats, if you're moving, which means it's harder to convey your vision. So very straightforward again. You don't have to write a lot for the questions. You just have to, it's more really about exam technique and understanding what the question is asking, I think, than just going blah and like splurging it all out on the paper. For your portfolio, waffle away, pad it out. Absolutely. But there's no time to do that in the drama written exam. So don't do it, basically. Keep it simple, bullet point it if you begin to feel like you are running out of time. Moving to the next question. I really like this question. I think I quite like the 6 markers, actually. I think for me, they're the most straightforward and the least ambiguous in this paper anyway. 3 props for a character and what it reveals about the character. So I think the second half of the question is the important bit always. What does it reveal about the character to the audience? If you miss that bit out to the audience, then that's where it kind of falls apart. So it's identify 3 appropriate props, explain and justify them, but also, in order to get the mark, what does that prop convey in terms of meaning about that character to the audience? Again, you did well on this question as a class, and I'm going to read you Jasmine's opinion. So Jasmine has chosen Mickey. For her first prop, she's said a toy gun. This can show that it was only a game at first, that kids of this time period could be playing with guns from a young age. This could encourage later life decisions. Gun reveals that Mickey has always been around guns, and this will have an impact on his life. Her second prop is a real gun. This can show that Mickey made some bad life decisions and it ended up with him and a real gun. And this is a progression from the use of the toy gun earlier in the musical. And then for her third prop, she has put antidepressants. This shows social class and the impact it can have on their lives heavily. So a lot of men were depressed and would take these pills after turning to crime. This shows the audience that Mickey really has changed His life has taken a turn for the worse. I'm almost sad that the prompts questions come up because I would have liked to have it this year. Okay, big, deep breath, sip of water moment. Because we're about to embark on the evil 8-mark questions. I hope you've been making notes even if you got full marks, by the way, because these are not just relating to these specific questions. These are kind of exam tips. This is about how to answer the questions. Moving to question 6, sigh. I can honestly say that this is the worst question I've ever seen on an exam paper. I mean, impact of improvisation techniques on, not even techniques. If it had said that, that would be good. Improvisation methods, like no one knew what it was last year, could be used on one actor to develop the maximum impact in the final scenes. I mean, it's just beyond. It's so multifaceted. It's got way too many bits in it. It's asking you to, when you're rehearsing, what techniques did you use to develop your character so that they were a certain way in the final scene of the actual performance. It's not, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most of the drama teachers across the country last year, this was the question that caused the biggest, drama, excuse the pun, across the country. I mean, students, just didn't know what to do with it. Even though, a lot of students put, why are they professional actors? Why are they improvising? I mean, that's like a goodbye right there. So improvisation methods, I think that terminology is part of what caused the problem, because people just didn't really understand what that was. And then by the time, even if they did understand that, they would kind of list improvisation techniques and then forget about maybe which actor they were talking about, or certainly how that would then impact on their performance in the final scene, because there's just so much to this question. It's a very, very, all the 8 markers are evil, but this one is eviler than others, which is why it is sometimes an idea to start the paper backwards so that you have enough time to read the 8 markers and work out what they're asking. For an 8-mark question, you have 8 minutes. If you spend 1 or 2 minutes working out what the question is asking you to do, it's time well spent, because in the 6 minutes remaining, you'll be able to be really speedy and quick rather than waffly about how you answer the question. So really take the time to figure out what the question is asking. And in this case, it's really asking about how the actor prepares for a role and how this preparation then created impact at the end, for the ending. So think about it as all the times that we do things like walk around the room, mini monologues, develop our physicality. We did some Stanislavski exercises when we were working on Blood Brothers, where you did some focus work, and then you had to imagine the surroundings of the character, and you had to ask yourself, what if this was a real situation? Things like hot seating help develop characterization. Off-text improvisation can help develop characterization. Putting the scene into your own words can help develop the emotions in the scene. Experimenting with voice and physicality, proxemics, levels. But this is all very well and good, and some of you have done a good job of listing those kind of things, but then it's so easy to forget to link it to the end scene. really, this was the question that you as a class did worst on, unsurprisingly, as did the country last year. And what will happen if that happens is that, contrary to popular belief, they will not lower the grade boundaries. What they will do is accept a more wide range of responses. That's what will actually happen. So I'm just looking at if I need to say anything else about this question, or if I've said it all. No, I haven't said it all. So this is clearly a classic question to write about your own performance work in, and that is what Ella O'Brien did last year, and Josh, who both got full marks on Blood Brothers paper. So this would be a good one to say, when I played Mickey in preparation for the final scene, this is what I did in order to show this emotion. Doesn't really matter if it's true or not. The examiner doesn't know. And that's probably the best approach to this question, but under pressure, that's a big ask. But yeah, if you get a question like this, it just becomes easier if you do it that way. And the best way to answer this question is to pick, it's an 8-mark question, so break it down, give 4 improvisation methods, and then 4 reasons why this helped you in your end performance. So I'm just gonna read you a little bit of Ella's. So Ella says, the character of Mickey, you could use hot seating to develop his character for the final scene. You could use hot seating to experience being Mickey as a younger person compared to him now, to make sure the decline in his happiness was clear and that the character was clearly depressed and had changed over the years. This is also effective in playing the role as how they are and feel as a person rather than just in the play. This would allow the actor to feel personally connected to their character and how their character feels, and therefore be able to show accurate and stronger emotion in the final scenes. Hot seating also allows the actor to know everything about their character. Knowing this builds confidence in their own ability, and therefore they'll be able to play the role better, trusting in the way that they're acting, further creating maximum impact for the ending. Experimentation could be used to develop the character further, to learn about the character's attributes. The actor could use experimentation with voice through tone, diction, inflection, pitch, to get a sense and idea of how the character would speak their lines at the ending and work out what fits the character best. This would allow them to play their character as they should be, and therefore in the final scenes the emotion and tone behind their voice would be clear, and emphasis on certain words would stand out correctly, and so on. And then this is where it begins to go wrong. So whilst no one got full marks on this question, Ella got 7 out of 8. And where it kind of went wrong after this point is that it then didn't become specific. So what could have been said is where would that emphasis be at the end, or how would that manifest itself? Because Ella then carries on by talking about brilliant techniques. So she mentions her 4 improvisation methods. She talks about hot seating, she talks about off-text improvisation. I'm not going to read it all to you. She talks about experimenting with voice, and she talks about experimenting with physicality. So she's got her 4 techniques, but towards the end of the answer, she forgets a little bit about the last part of the question and linking it to the end scene, which is easily done with this question, quite frankly. So very, very challenging question. Shouldn't have been in the paper, really, in my opinion, but there you go. It was, so you got to deal with it. On an upside, if they give you a wide range of response, then I guess that makes it better. So my message to you is always answer every question, whatever happens. I will buy your papers back, and I will look at them to make sure that you have done that. I mean it. That is a threat. Yeah, I mean, I would rather that you waffled any old thing out than wrote nothing. Because what happened across the country with this question is that people panicked and wrote nothing. That is then 0 marks. If you were the one who didn't panic and burbled some rubbish out, the exam board's gone, oh, this question was too hard, we better accept pretty much almost any answer. You might end up with 4 or 5 marks on it. So really worth writing something in every box, because you can only get, if you don't answer the 8-mark questions at all, then the maximum that you can get for this section is a 3. So even if you get full marks for every other question. So it's really, really important that you put something in every box. Moving on to the beautiful question 7. Are we on 7? We're on 7. Oh, right. The challenges for the set designer in communicating meaning to an audience. Another absolutely ambiguous question, in my opinion, because it's not really clear whether it's asking you to talk about, to offer solutions. So it's asking you to explain what challenges there are for the set designer in communicating meaning to an audience at one key moment. It's not necessarily asking you to say how you then would deal with that challenge, which I think is weird, with it being a practical minded exam. So it's in my nature to say a challenge would be how to show the social class. I would do this by flats of the houses, blah, blah, blah. I just don't think I could personally answer it without then almost offering a solution to that challenge, but it's not necessarily asking that question. So if you state what the challenges are in communicating meaning, then you'll get the marks. Here's where it begins to go wrong as well. 1 key moment. 1. Some of you wrote about the production as a whole, and that you can never get full marks however good your answer is. So really, really important that you read the question again, circle the keywords, and take the time with the 8 markers to do that. Take 1 or 2 minutes to do it, because then it will be really quick when you know in your head what it is that you're trying to say to answer the question. Take more if you need it. I mean, obviously don't take 7 minutes thinking about the question, but take the time you need to make sure that you understand the question. Because it's asking for challenges for the designer in communicating meaning, like you're dividing the question into early challenges for meaning. It's an 8-mark question and it's only referring to one moment. So I would recommend giving 4 challenges and 4 justifications for why these are challenges in communicating meaning. So 4 explanations. And make sure you state the key moment, by the way. All of you wrote what your key moment was at the start of your questions, but none of you saw that little bit that said key moment, colon. So it is important to do that. I'm going to tell you something really important now, which really helped me understand this question better. This was one of the questions where I had to just go back to Ella O'Brien's paper from last year and go, what? And I'm the teacher. And this little bit of OCR's mark scheme is brilliant, where they state what the challenges are for a set designer. For a set designer. So make a list of these, pause the video, go back or whatever, because I think this will really help you for future. So because this is what the director does. So some of the challenges for the director are around the performance space. So it's a challenge to work around certain size dimensions or whatever of the space that they've got. Did I just say director? I did say director. Set design question. Bit thrown now about why OCR have put lighting and sound, because that's the lighting and sound design. Do you see what I mean? Like, this is so ambiguous. Let's just ignore those. Locations are a challenge for the set designer, for definite. So how to represent the different locations, so that would be a good one to do. A challenge for the set designer in Blood Brothers is how to represent the variety of locations to create the different meanings for blah blah blah, and then you could offer some solutions about how they would create those meanings. Backdrops and projections. Scene changes is another good one. How to create the scene changes is a challenge for the set designer, clearly. So again, here you could talk about the flats flying in and things like that. Other challenges are obviously the set, the actual furniture, how that comes on and off, and all linked then to creating meaning in the performance. So the movement of set, entrances and exits is another good one to write about. This does kind of apply to director and set designer, to be honest. So you could say it is a challenge that there are so many entrances and exits in Blood Brothers, and then link that to the meaning of certain of your one key moment. I guess it becomes easier when you think about it as one key moment. So it's, if you're talking about the ending for, if you're talking about the scene, the ending, for example, it's a challenge to create all of the entrances and exits, and where are people coming from, to maintain that kind of, in terms of meaning for an audience, to maintain that kind of sense of excitement and what's going to happen, and suspense and drama, really. So that would be a good one to do. The style of performance, the types of stage, blocking, audience perspective, props, time period, stage directions. That's another one, perhaps. Proxemics, maybe. I mean, some of those would be quite good to write about. I think now, having talked through it myself, I could write an 8-mark answer. But that's with the OCR's mark scheme and the full mark answers from last year. So under pressure, this is an intensely difficult question, I think, in terms of again, it's multifaceted. It's got so many bits to it. It's not clear whether you're supposed to offer the solutions, but otherwise, how do you make it clear that that particular challenge and how you deal with it will create meaning to an audience? Just a difficult question. I think it's about picking a moment that is challenging, really, and remembering that it says one moment. If you pick a moment that's just generally challenging to create, like the ending with all the shooting and running, police coming through the audience and things. If you pick a moment that's not challenging for the set designer, then clearly that's not a good idea. Pick one that is a challenge, and then you'll be able to write a better answer. Whew, that was stressful. Right, moving. Oh wait, did I have some to read out? Yes. Okay, again, no one got full marks on this question. I'm going to read a bit of Natasha's because, it makes me feel sane again after trying to talk myself through that question. So, what Natasha's written is brilliant. She got 6 marks, but that's only because she needed one more challenge. So I said, list 4 challenges and how they would communicate meaning. And she's kind of done 3. So it would have been, had she done one more, then it would have been full marks for the question. It makes you feel safe, this answer, like it is possible to answer those impossible questions. One key moment in Blood Brothers that faces many challenges for a set designer in communicating meaning to the audience is when the 2 brothers, Mickey and Edward, meet for the first time. First of all, they must be able to show clear differences between the boys based on their working class and middle upper class upbringing and what this means for their lives. For example, the set at this point should show the stark difference between the 2 neighborhoods. The boys grew up in flying flats, blah, 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 can then be used how this has affected their lives. So that's one example of a challenge. Another demand from the set designer at this point in the play is to communicate the time period effectively through backdrops and props to the audience. This will then give context and meaning to time-specific references in the class design divides, such as the dole. There we go, another 2 marks. Another demand of this specific scene from the set designer is making sure the few props used have multi-uses. For instance, there is a bench, but the 2 boys imagine it to be a car. This is particularly important as it represents the audience how at this point in the play the boys are full of imagination and energy, and their class divide doesn't affect the way that they interact when playing. So that's 3 really good examples. With one more, it would have been a full marker. Perhaps not a super challenging scene, so maybe picking a more challenging scene would have been an idea, but a really strong answer there. You will have noticed, no doubt, because it's you guys, that it seems like Natasha owes the donut jar 20p. However, she does not, because I'll talk about this when I get back, when we can all see each other, because it's a struggle for me to accept this. OCR are calling Blood Brothers a play. Dramatic pause. Anyway, we're going to continue to fill up the donut jar because we want donuts. So if you want to call it a play, you can call it a play. I hated saying that. Moving on to the last question. Very quickly. Right, directing actors to show... where's my... I'm on the wrong... social context. This, I thought, was a really evil question, but for some reason students last year, and you guys, did pretty well on it. In fact, 4 of you got full marks on it. I don't really understand, because I think this is really difficult as well. The reason I think it's difficult is because it's about acting. So I think to show social context for the set designer or the director or the costume designer would be quite an easy question. But how would you direct the actors to highlight social context is more challenging. And I think last year a lot of people forgot about the actors bit. And also here we're talking about 2 key moments. That's important to note. So if you started to ramble on about the whole musical, or if you only spoke about one moment, it doesn't matter how good your answer is, you can't get full marks. So 2 moments. So because it's 2 moments, you could either pick 4 examples for each if you're that way inclined to have that level of time on your hands, or 2 examples with really detailed justifications for each. Would also, for each of the 2 moments, obviously, would also be fine. As long as your answer is really strong, you would get the points, the marks. So one key thing to mention here is that it's about social context, which often makes people panic a bit. But actually, it says in the OCR mark scheme, the question invites a director's perspective on ways of helping actors to highlight social context. And then it says, it is appropriate for candidates to refer to cultural and historical contexts besides social ones. Not exactly sure why the question didn't say that, but there you go. So basically, what we're saying is that in the same way that actor, director, designer often overlaps, so does social, historical, and cultural context. They overlap. They're all part of each other, of course. So if you talked about the recession or education or anything like that, which perhaps was more, the recession was perhaps more a historical context, that would be fine, because it all informs the social context. It all is part of the social context. So they do overlap. So you could talk about all of these, really. I think Some good things to talk about in this question are kids' games, because that's very much social context. The montage, because of the whole social context of teenagers becoming a thing. Education informs obviously social context, because it's the context of the fact that they're from such different backgrounds and the impact that has. The police, seen in the same way. Or you can talk about two moments where of Mickey's and Eddie's relationship, two moments where that has kind of changed from perhaps the opening, or when they're 14, to when they meet again at Christmas, because that's a social interaction, that's their social relationship that's been affected by the social context in which they live. I think the difficulty with this question really is that it then, on top of being about acting, is asking you, which is easy to forget, is asking you how the director is directing the acting. They're really hard, the 8-mark questions, so just write something and you'd be surprised how many marks you'll pick up. I'll read you a little bit of Grace's epic answer. And by epic I mean long, because she was one of the people who got full marks, so she's written some really, really good things here. As a director, in the scene that Mickey and Edward meet, I would need to separate their classes and show social context clearly. I would have Mickey bouncy and constantly moving, using large gestures, for example when he's telling a story. He would almost dance around the stage, using body language as well as hand gestures to almost absent-mindedly imitate Eddie. The way that the boys stand can be used to the director's advantage to be able to enhance Russell's message. If Mickey was to have a bad posture and slump over, it would not only show his social class and the way his mother brought him up, but it would also have the message behind it that when the boys would stand next to each other, because Eddie would stand up straighter and taller and have a very good posture as he was taught by his parents and teachers. Another point in the musical where we can highlight social context and sexism, which is obviously another social context thing, of the time period is when Edward gets suspended from school for wearing his locket. All the while the teacher is shouting at Edward, Edward's eye contact should stay firmly on the ground, and he should have his hands behind his back to show clearly who is holding the power at this point in the scene. The teacher uses sexism to say that only girls wear lockets. It's relevant to the time period because that would not be said now. So the reason I like these examples is because they're so focused on the acting. So focused on the acting. Which is what the question is asking. And she managed to get, even though she doesn't really speak in detail about the director, she managed to get that word in there using the words from the question. So another one that I just want to flag is Akari's answer, and the reason that this one is so brilliant, again, Akari would not have time to write this much in a real exam, but what is great about this answer is that hers is very focused on the director directing the acting. So it's a very kind of a level up really on in terms of depth. So I'm just going to read you a few bits. The first key moment I've chosen is the scene where Mickey and Eddie first meet as children. As a director, I would send the actors playing Mickey and Eddie to do some research on being upper and working class so that they really know what actions to do and how to speak. I would then get them to stop at key points in the scene and ask them how their character would be feeling or what action their character would be doing so that they would feel more connected with their character. It's not just a matter of the action, but of the way in which they perform that action. In the scene I am discussing, Mickey and Eddie are meeting for the first time. The director should encourage the actors to explore the class differences and any obstacles that might make it difficult for them to become friends easily. I would also make sure that the difference in social class was obvious to an audience. I would want the actors to understand what the character is doing and why at certain points. For example, when Edward offers Mickey a sweet and Mickey is shocked, I would want the actors to understand that the reason Mickey is shocked is because no one's ever offered him a sweet before without it being a joke. I would also want the actors to think of how their character would react to the situation. For example, when Mickey is shocked at Edward's generosity, he could at first be shocked and then be suspicious and fidget a lot as he tries to work out the catch. The character playing Edward would have to sit very politely and sit still on the bench very curiously. As the director, I want the actors playing the characters to understand what the characters are doing and why. So this is very much, on a really high level of a response, in terms of it completely answers, as a director, how would you direct the actors to highlight social context? To very lots of depth there. And that, my fellow what? I'm not a student. I was about to say my fellow students. No, I'm going to say this. My fellow dramatists. Was it, really, for today? I know, only an hour. I bet it's just a joy whenever you get one of these from me. It's like, oh God. I noticed that the first video I sent last time had loads of views. Second one had a bit less views. And the third one, which was actually the important one, even less views. So I do understand that I get boring. Thank you if you've made it this far. It will be worth it in year 11 when you open that exam envelope because you understand how to answer the exam paper perfectly. I'm mega proud of, like I said at the start, of how you guys have engaged with the work that I've set you. Even in lockdown, you've just made me the proudest teacher. Now I'm getting all emotional. Pause. I know you guys are rolling your eyes right now. But anyway, pulling myself together. If you just keep going like this, we've got this. Lockdown really sucks, and not doing practical drama is awful, and I hate it as much as you do. Just keep working through the boring theory like you have been doing. It's going to make such a difference next year. I'm so proud. Keep going, and see you sooner than we think, I hope. Really soon, for some really weird social distancing drama where we all sit on the field 2 meters apart and shout at each other. To be honest, I would rather do that than not at all. So keep it up. We've got this, and see you real soon.